first of all, I do want to get your thoughts, Brenden, on Thomas Saji. I keep mispronouncing his name, but I was close.
You're close.
Or Saji. Saji is correct. Came up yesterday, made his MLB debut. They put him in at shortstop, giving Mason Wynn a blow. And obviously, hard to expect an MLB debut to go glowingly all the time. He went over 4 with a couple of strikeouts. Again, if you get more at-bats with him, we'll see what he looks like. But I wonder your thoughts on just that move.
Yeah, I mean, that part of the move I think is a good one, and I do hope Ollie Marmol finds Saji's way into the lineup more often than he doesn't. The part that a lot of fans had an issue with was Victor Scott II going back the other way for Thomas Saji when you think about what it was like for Mason Wynn last September to get everyday opportunities, and then even though he did not perform in those opportunities, hit like 170 last year, he came into spring with that experience under his belt, and I think it's paid dividends for him this year, and we've seen Mason Wynn be one of the top Cardinals. Now, his numbers offensively have trailed off a little bit lately. It was probably high time for him to get a day off yesterday, but largely he has done an impeccable job taking that shortstop opportunity and running with it. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you give Victor Scott a similar opportunity down the stretch of the season that it's over, folks? Like, they're at 500. They've kind of backslid a little bit. They were playing pretty well for a while. There's just too much ground to make up, and it's not just one team. You can't just rely on the Braves to go 2-17. You would need the Mets to do it as well, and the Cubs are ahead of you. It's done. So with that in mind, yes, you'd like to see the young guys get a chance to play, but they called up one young guy and sent another one down. They are still playing Michael Ciani every day, regularly in center field. I like Michael Ciani. I wonder if they're getting a longer look at him to maybe showcase for trade, to maybe have more data to make an internal decision on, what's his role going to be for next year? How should they go into the offseason? But it is one of those things that you go, well, it did work out so well for Mason last year. If Victor is kind of a similar prospect stature, it's a little bit of a bummer that they're not giving Victor Scott the same run. But I'm not coming at that from an anti-Michael Ciani position, because I actually think he should be on the big league roster next year. I just don't know if Ciani should be the fourth outfielder, should be a guy that they want to rely upon every day. I think the bat has to reach a certain level, and right now it's not at that level. He's kind of come down since his recovery and return from the oblique. So that's the one thing of it that you do scratch your head a little bit about. And initially, when they called up Ciani or they brought him back from the injured list, they said, well, he's going to play, but Victor Scott's going to gain the benefit of being around the big league coaching staff, and he can track fly balls before the games, and he can do all this side work that's going to be really beneficial. And then they sort of, like, looking back at that now, that was just kind of a convenient explanation, it feels like, because they didn't stick with it for very long. He's now back in the minors and going to maybe finish up the season with AAA. But that's the one part, is like, well, if Victor Scott is a guy that you think is potentially going to be a difference maker as early as next year, maybe just getting him this time and using it the way they did for Mason Wynn last year could have been beneficial, but they don't make that choice. We'll see on Saji, though, if they give him regular opportunity or not.
I mean, I feel like at some point they should find out a little more about him, because he was one of those prospects that they targeted in the trade with Jordan Montgomery, and one of those interesting pieces, that you wanted to see if it could help the Cardinals going forward. And yeah, it is tough to hear this from the Cardinals sometimes, because we've seen several instances of them maybe talking out of both sides of their mouth on, like, okay, we're going to go this direction with this particular player, and then do the opposite maybe a week later before you actually get any sort of data on this player. So we wonder, was it even about the data at all? So the Victor Scott decision is puzzling in that sense. And even then, like, no matter who you think about who should be in center field, Cardinals do need a plan for center field next year, right? Because, I mean, out of Ciani and Scott, they could probably make both of those guys work at some point, and there's no other solid option other than a guy like maybe Lars Nootbaar that you trust to play center every once in a while, but he's not your permanent solution there. So I would think that there should be room for maybe not the current big league roster, but down the road there should be room for both Scott and Ciani to try and make that position work. Yeah,
I think the concern, look, this is how some people feel about it, is that they are very similar players. Their skill sets overlap in a way that you might get more utility if you would trade one. We've talked about this. Like, they're not trading Victor Scott. I'd be shocked if they trade Victor Scott. Unless they're really getting something that's just a tent pole type of bat that's going to be a major fixture, and he's part of a package to get that, and it's somebody that's already established, then maybe. But I think they want to believe in Victor for the future. But, like, they're not giving him the daily opportunities in the present. And in the grand scheme of it, it's like, okay, we're talking about the last 3 weeks of the season. It's not really a long runway. But Mason Wynn getting that last year ended up being pretty valuable, I think, for his development. Whereas Ciani, like, we shouldn't talk about Michael Ciani as though he's like a 29-year-old that can't still improve and grow. He's 25. He just turned 25. So he's kind of a younger player as well. But we kind of put him in a box where we think we know that this is his upside offensively, and it's not very high. So as a result, this is the way that we view this player, and we already know what he is. So give the time to Victor right now. Like, Ollie Marmol is very high on Michael Ciani from everything I've heard him say, the words coming out of his mouth. If that's how he feels, like, he's backing that up with playing him consistently to the point that the front office goes, well, if we're going to get Saji up here, might as well maybe be Victor that goes back because he's not playing anyway. So, like, that's the dance we do. I don't know as far as next year, because, yes, you could see the world in which they both could play some next year. Injuries do happen. Whoever wins the competition, if there is one out of camp, he's going to start there, but could have an injury, and then the other guy takes the spot. The thing of it is, it just doesn't make sense from a platoon perspective. You'd like to have one of the guys platooning in center actually be the opposite-handedness. A righty bat and a lefty bat that have those skill sets fits a lot better with the profile of doing the platoon thing. But you're right, elsewhere in the organization, they just don't have anybody that's really knocking on the door to be the center fielder next year. These two guys are kind of who I think you would have as the leaders in the clubhouse. Andy, though, they've got deeper issues with this roster. Like, they need to... and I felt this way earlier in the year, but it's always such a difficult conversation because there's no obvious correct answer. And for an organization and a front office that has had a hard time kind of connecting the dots that are obvious, like, all right, we need a catcher. Let's get Wilson Contreras in free agency. We'll spend some money on it. But then even that, you stumble out of the starting blocks and have some weirdness associated. So when there's not an obvious correct answer for how you should reshuffle this roster, I just don't think this is the front office, the folks that are in charge right now, and Mozeliak is the leader of that group, to be the group to fix it and to kind of reorganize it. But let me just read you some names. Like, I'm asking about, Andy, 2025 right now. Is Burleson a fixture of your 2025 lineup if this Cardinals team is going to move forward and try to... I'm not saying they're going to contend next year, but they're going to try to put their best lineup on the field. Alec Burleson, is he a fixture?
I'd say sure. Yeah.
A building block?
Yeah.
Okay. Lars Nootbaar, fixture, building block?
Sure.
I think they would have said 100% coming into the year.
Coming into the year, yeah. They'd be like, we love Lars Nootbaar. And now...
No hesitation.
Right.
But that was even yet another year of kind of having some injuries. And okay, Jordan Walker. The answer should be yes.
Should be yes, right? Yeah.
But I just named three outfielders. None of them are center fielders. Like, I don't think they think that Nootbaar is a center fielder. So
there's
you've got a lot of names, and Donovan plays left field. If Nolan Gorman's ever going to come back, those are two more names. Someone's got to play. Saji could play second. Gorman could. Donovan could play second or left. You've got a lot of names, and I don't think anyone. I just named like 6 or 7 guys. I don't think you could tell me definitively, oh, yeah, that's a dog. That's a dude for our 2025 lineup.
Right.
They're going to have to pick and choose, but they're also going to have to base it off of what other teams are willing to spend and give you talent in return if you're talking about a trade. So, and like, that's not even getting into the veterans that are owed money. Those are the 5 or 6 or 7 guys that are supposed to be building block pieces. Some of them will be. Some of them will probably be traded within the next 2 to 3 years. But picking correctly of which guys to hang on to and to prioritize, that's not been a strong suit of this club in the last couple of years.
And then it's backfilling with, okay, we like this prospect down here that we know could be up at some points. Let's make sure he has a spot to be able to play with once he does get there. So that aspect also has to be considered, and that's just not something that we've seen the Cardinals do a lot of. At least lately, they've tried to trust the veterans. Like, go and get this veteran here to fill this spot because we know it's a stopgap. And then it stops the growth of whoever might be coming up in the fold and things like that.
It's not a safe thing to do, though, to prioritize and think you've got a prospect so you leave a spot open for him. Honestly, that is what they did with Mason Wynn, to their credit. They basically said, we're going to get a stopgap backup shortstop like Brandon Crawford because Mason Wynn's our guy. We set ourselves up that he has to be our guy. And, like, to their credit, that has worked out for a year. But in a lot of these other areas, you have folks that, if you're grading them on a 100-point scale, you'd say are kind of C+, B- type of guys that you're hoping develop into A type of guys, but you can't play them all. And some of them are struggling in the present, like a Gorman and a Jordan Walker. Do those present struggles lead to the Cardinals, hey, they might want to trade this guy, but they can't get anything for him, so they hold on to him until all they can get for him is Sean Armstrong? Or do they have to make a tougher decision earlier than they did with Dylan Carlson because the roster is beckoning, it's begging for those difficult decisions to be made, but you like all your guys. You don't want to trade any of your guys away, but they have to get the roster to make a little more sense. The pieces don't really quite fit perfectly, but then when you do make the deals and the pieces fit perfectly, you better hope you kept the right players and backed the right horses, because then if they're not performing, you see a situation like they had with, hey, we need a bat to come up and fill in against lefties for a little bit. Oh, we don't have any? I guess we got to use our top prospect, Jordan Walker, for that. Like, you get into these roster crunches quickly.
You do. And then on top of that, when you're trying to decide who to trade, and I don't think the front office necessarily thinks a ton about this, but maybe they do a little more now. You're afraid of maybe trading the wrong guy away, and then they look great with their new team, which has happened a few times.
It's happened a bunch, but you can't be fearful of that. You have to trust in your own.
You have to know what these guys are going to be. That's the job of the front office. You have to know you're right. You have to trust your judgment. I think this front office has kind of paralysis by overanalysis, where it's like almost their destiny to fail on these types of trades or these decisions. And I don't know the right answers. I can't sit here today and go, no, Burleson has to play every day because he's this, but you can't trust Nootbaar because I don't feel that way. I don't know that, and I'm sure the Cardinals have to answer that as well. But it's tough because it's not obvious. And Burleson is the interesting case to where, like, well, he could play some first, so maybe it plays into, like, okay, what's Goldschmidt going to want next year as far as money? Are you willing to pay that? And then filling a position again with a veteran, whereas, if you're wanting to find out more about the young guys that could be pieces in the future, like Alec Burleson or maybe even Luken Baker, who knows? But it's just takes up another spot. And it seems like the move that a team that wants to win now would make to get a veteran in. And I agree with the moves of the Cardinals trying to make sure that they're a team that contends, and they should have been that this year, but it just fell flat because several different guys underperformed, and it just never materialized. I think it fell flat, and like their plan for the rotation is what it is. We'll see Lance Lynn again tonight, and their rotation ERA hasn't been strong. We didn't expect it to be a top half rotation. In terms of ERA, we just thought, hey, you're going to have veterans that have been there, and the bullpen will be what carries your pitching staff, and you'll win a lot of 6-5 games. Like, that was the thesis statement of the 2024 Cardinals. It didn't work because they ranked 21st right now in OPS of all MLB teams. And last year, their offense underperformed, and you look at the total numbers and go, all right, this wasn't a good offense. Another year goes by, 2024, it's not a good Cardinals offense on the whole. But I look at the 9 players that you'd project to be in there, and even number 10, number 11, and I go, yeah, I kind of like that guy, though. No, you could keep that guy. Even like, if I'm doing it internally, I know they've always been higher on the guys that they have, so they're not going to be dogging on the guys that are on their team. If I'm out here on the outside saying it, 21st in OPS, that's not a good offense where you should basically bring everybody back. No. But who are they going to get rid of? And I'm not talking about the veterans. Like Goldie, you could let walk because he's a free agent. That would be a passive move. It's not actively jettisoning somebody. These other guys that are not in big contracts and they are under team control and they're supposed to be getting better instead of kind of stalling out at where they are right now as being just kind of average players, which ones are going to be the ones you can consider building blocks and cornerstones? Because we let it be an anomaly for 1 year and said, all right, there were some reasons that last year the offense tailed off. You got a lot of good young players. They're all going to ascend. 2024 is the year. 2024 has happened. Are they going to run it back with the majority of these guys, or did they do like a modified blow it up and make
a couple of big moves in the offseason that we don't see coming. I don't know what they'll do or what the answer is. It is their job to figure it out, though. It's not mine.
And I don't know if myself or the actual Cardinal fans out there believe this front office to actually make that happen. So that's the conundrum that franchise is in.